All right. Oh, sweet. So we got a good crowd today. Let's see, we got Adrian from, I know you told me how to say it. I thought it was like Nihana. It, from Alaska. We got to work together at a workshop up in Alaska a couple of years ago where I got to see the aurora. We've got Richard from Shelby, North Carolina. My dog was born in Shelby, North Carolina. It's a funny coincidence. Next to all the NASCAR tracks, right? New Hampshire, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, Montana, a retired solar system ambassador. Awesome. Pat T.I. from Bellevue College. Awesome. Got an outreach coordinator. Colleen, oh, from the Hawaii State Public Library System. That's awesome. I'll have the privilege of being there in early August to do some solar science workshops. I'll be on all 4 islands Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So reach out to me. You might have already heard about it. We're working with Danielle Todd and Phyllis Tanakuni. So yeah, it's great. Oh, hey, Ginger. Great to see you. Anyway, okay, a lot of great people. I'm not going to say hey to everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us. Just a heads up, as I'm talking, I'll be a little slow to check the chat. But we do have a couple of other folks from the Space Science Institute joining us in the chat. I believe my colleague Amy Briones is in the chat. She'll be dropping links. We have the wonderful Christine Shupla from the Lunar and Planetary Institute, who's also going to be dropping links, help answering questions. Just as you guys or as you all ask questions, it can get a little overwhelming in there, and they're going to help us kind of sort through everything. So if you do give a Q&A, if you have a question, again, please drop that in the Q&A. We'll have a specific set time for the Q&A. And if I miss your chat message, just pop it in there again. I'll be checking them after I turn things over. Okay, so today we're joined by, of course, many of you probably know me from the Space Science Institute, NASA at my library, StarNet. We just are kind of wrapping up our solar eclipse project, which is what I've been working on for the past 2 years. Then we also have Laura and Liz MacDonald, Dr. Liz MacDonald from the Aurorasaurus project. I'm super pumped up to have them join. There's been a lot of interest in auroras. This picture that I included is actually one I took just north of Longmont, Colorado, where I live. So yeah, we've got some really great folks. Laura and Liz, do you want to say hey real quick?
Hello.
Let's see.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Brandt Edson. It's lovely to meet you all. I'm excited to be here today. Liz will be talking the most, but I will be in the chat and I'll be happy to answer questions and share links.
Awesome. So I do want to do like a quick just overview agenda, and then I'm going to turn things over to Liz to kind of start talking about auroras. This NASA at my library project is a NASA funded project through a cooperative agreement. This is our thanks to the funders slide. We are part of the NASA Science Mission Directorate. We really love our relationship with NASA and getting to work with public libraries. So if you see NASA at my library, you know that it's a good resource. All of our stuff is free at StarNet and through NASA at my library. Your tax dollars have already paid for it. So yeah, thank you, NASA. Just a quick agenda today. I'm going to wrap up my talking here shortly. I'm going to turn things over to the Aurorasaurus team, which is the best name ever. We'll do a Q&A after that. Please don't hold back on questions. We have a lot of time allotted for questions. We'll do a Aurora chalk art, which is, if you did an eclipse chalk art, it's somewhat similar, but there's a couple of different twists on it. And then I'll close out by just giving you a few resources that you can utilize in your library STEM programming. Okay, I have a silly icebreaker. Just put your response. Some of you may have done this already. Just put your response in the chat. We'll move through this really quick so we have plenty of time. But it's just a fun little icebreaker. There's no like rhyme or reason to your answer. But what solar feature do you feel like today? Do you feel like a sunspot? You're cool, you're calm. Well, you're still like 10,000 degrees, but you're cool, you're calm, you're collected. Are you a solar prominence where you're feeling a little showy and bright? You're also feeling grounded and connected. This is such a nerdy solar science icebreaker. Are you a coronal mass ejection where you're powerful? And I don't know what else it says, but yeah, powerful, hot, dynamic. Or are you the sun's corona? Are you feeling a little sassy and gassy? Yeah, those are your 4 options. Give me a response. It doesn't have to make any sense. Solar prominence, sunspot. Definitely a sunspot. 47 here at the moment in Alaska. Wow. Shagaloo. All right. I like to start out my like if I do a solar science programming, I like to start it out with something silly like this. Just because, people might not really know some of these terms, and it's a fun little introduction to them, but also it makes people kind of like, just lets you know that like, hey, this is going to be a fun program. This is not some serious lecture that you need to pay, take notes and everything. Sets a fun little precedent. All right. I don't think anybody chose Corona, so I'll choose number 4 for myself. Okay, Liz, I'm going to turn things over to you. This is just like a little placeholder slide, so I'll stop sharing. I will say you'll have the coolest logo I have perhaps ever seen. Major props for that. So let me stop sharing.
Thank you. Thanks for liking our name. All right, and logo. Let's see. One second. Okay. Are you seeing my slides here? Okay, great. I will launch into this. And as Brooke said, we are very happy to take questions afterwards. And also, this is only going to be like a 15-minute overview starting at the basics. And there's always a lot more questions. So we're not going to get to everything in these slides. But we wanted to give you a little introduction to our project, which is also a science activation project doing citizen science that people can participate in anywhere in the world. And we actually started the project at the New Mexico Consortium, and then I work at NASA Goddard, as does Laura, but I'm remotely in Washington State. So, and we also have NSF support. So thanks to all of those. I will also say that I am a physicist by training. So a lot of this, although we're going to get into more of the art and appreciation, is a lot of kind of where I'm coming from is more on the Western science side. But of course, Aurora is important to many people for many different reasons. And there's a lot of knowledge out there about the Aurora. So want to appreciate that as well. I'm going to start with 2 fresh slides on the recent storm. And just as a takeaway point, so our project, this storm was so large on May 10th that the aurora was visible by camera only down to South America, South Africa. I got an email from the Sultanate of Oman that subvisual aurora was seen there. It was just amazing. And also broadly across North America. And so I hope that many of you got to see that. I don't know if we actually took the poll on that. Yeah, please feel free to put in the chat if you got to see it. Here's the poll.
Yeah,
And we're
I just launched it.
cool.
I hope it's not too distracting.
Yeah. Yeah, we're very keen on that. And perhaps, actually, you can put in the chat if you might have already submitted an observation to our participatory project. You can see many of those reports here in the lower right. And we did receive thousands of reports, so we're still sifting through the data. Such a large storm is very unusual. And the first big storm like this since digital cameras and cell phones have been capable of easily capturing the photons at the upper atmosphere. So there's a lot to delve into there on the science side. And let's see, a few things about Aurorasaurus. So we have existed since 2014, but there weren't any storms this large in the last solar maximum, the peak of the sun's activity 11 years ago. We're kind of at that broad peak again. And that's what drove this activity in May. The sun just really gave us several burps in a row that were very well aligned to hit Earth and create such a large storm. But we do have alerts for people based on your location. And that also includes our monthly newsletter. And then people are invited to participate. You can still submit a report if you have a photo or if you just did see it or did not see it. And you remember where you were and when that was. That's still actionable. And we are This map is available in real time and as well going back in time to show people where the aurora model predicted it was visible, where people saw it, and all of those good kind of things. And we also do blog about aurora at kind of translating from often some very interesting new papers, new types of aurora, citizen science interests. And so all of that is on our blog. As well, we have a page for educators. Yeah, and it was really great to see alerts go out even into Texas during this storm. So those are the two freshest slides, but I'm going to back up a little bit now and come back to all of that. So aurora, also known as the northern lights, the aurora borealis, and the southern lights, the aurora australis. It's made by processes in space between the sun and Earth. The essential ingredients are those particles, not just light, but charged particles from the sun. The magnetic field of both the sun and the Earth are Earth's dipole magnet, and the upper atmosphere of the Earth. That's where the particles that get trapped within the Earth's magnetic field rain down and light up the upper atmosphere, which is not like the gas that we breathe, but just not very dense at all, but still dense enough to create enough light when those particles are impinging on it. So this also happens on other planets. Here's a little cartoon version of what I just said, possibly better said than me. Hopefully you'll hear the sound too.
The sun is our nearest star. It is constantly giving off particles along with magnetic fields that flow out across the solar system. Scientists call this the solar wind. As the solar wind reaches Earth, it draws the magnetic field around Earth out long, away from the sun. Charged particles from the solar wind get stuck in these magnetic fields and go around to the far side, like this. There, they stretch the magnetic fields out, and snap! The magnetic fields reconnect with one another in a new way. The particles are accelerated back toward the north and south poles, where they rain into the ionized upper atmosphere. They collide with atoms and molecules there to create the lights of the aurora.
All right, that was Laura, who, if you can't tell, is an excellent science communicator and museum education
The sun is our
person.
nearest star.
All right, 1 second. Okay, so here's a little bit of a close-up of what happens in the upper atmosphere. The kind of column here in the middle right-hand side shows the typical colors, which are scientifically arranged in this order because of the particles and the way that they layer in the upper atmosphere. So there's a bunch of oxygen and some nitrogen. And you get these rare chemical transitions when particles from space hit the particles in the upper atmosphere that are very distinct wavelengths of light. The green and the red are both from oxygen, but at different altitudes and different like orbital transitions. And then there's also both nitrogen atoms and nitrogen molecules that cause slightly different colors of pink and purple at different altitudes. This storm, because it's such a big storm, particularly has a lot more red. And that red can happen in a couple different ways, but a lot more red. That's very interesting. And then also you can get some unusual combinations of color, like during this storm, because it was so strong, but the color blends like light. And that's how you can get some of the more unusual colors too. All right. There are many different types of aurora. Our project actually asks about these three kind of main types that are easily distinguishable. A type called the discrete arcs, which are like the curtains that you see that kind of move around. pulsating patches, which if you stay up until after midnight, you're more likely to see those. And those are what's called electromagnetic waves interacting with the particles and turning that light on and off in this really cool lava lamp kind of spatial and structure by both space and time. And then there's also diffuse glows of aurora that are more like you might be very far away from it, or during this kind of large storm, there might be just a bunch of red that you see. And then there's even a type of aurora called Steve, which is named after the movie Over the Hedge and this little squirrel right here, but was named by some of the citizen scientists up in Canada that we work with, and wasn't a known, well-described type of aurora. And now it actually is much more understood and researched. So we can talk about Steve later too. How can you see aurora? So if you are further north where it normally hangs out, Fairbanks, Alaska is a great place. That is under where the auroral oval, the ring of aurora normally happens. You also want to be up there, not when it's summer, not right now, but when it's dark. And then, of course, you need clear skies, so you want to watch your regular weather forecast. There's also a lot, there's space weather forecasts, which have to do with how strong the material coming from the sun is going to hit us. And that's kind of constantly varying, both in its speed, its density, and in the embedded magnetic field direction, which matters because it means whether those particles are going to couple strongly, the energy will be transferred into the Earth's magnetic field or not. But yeah, there's also a lot of groups on social media, especially locally. So if you're in Washington State, for instance, there is a great Facebook group for aurora chasers, and people help each other out a lot. It's really a great community. And yes, Fairbanks is amazing, even outside of Aurora, of course. Yes, so these are a few snapshots of our blog and the learn part of our website. 2 places you can learn more. Laura came up with this awesome Aurora altitudes knit hat that is a blog post, a recent blog post, describing the height of the aurora that usually happens starting about 60 miles or 100 kilometers up. And then you can kind of get the sense of how tall that is, which is also why aurora can be seen very far away, thousands of miles away. But most of our weather and mountains and everything, the highest clouds are only in row 2 of this knitting here. So yes, everybody loves the hat. And auroras are important both for practical reasons, what we call space weather, which can impact our technologies that rely on power and things that fly in space. But that is monitored and observed and protected generally. And then it's also important for reasons that are kind of fundamental to our place on Earth and to the reason that we have life on Earth here, both having an atmosphere and a magnetic field to help keep that atmosphere. So citizen science, hopefully many of you are already familiar with citizen science, but it's something that works across all different fields and is a great way to find new things. Anyone can participate. Scientists, can be very, trained in such detail that they miss things that people might see. And that's kind of the story of Steve, really, is that Steve happens further south than the usual aurora in the northern hemisphere and in a region that wasn't as well studied. So it was brought to our attention by photographers. And then the way that Aurorasaurus works is people submit reports, and those are the if you saw aurora, you get a little green pin on the map. If you did not see aurora, that's also valid. You might be cloudy or clear. And then there's also the model of where aurora should occur. And this red line is where the aurora ought to be visible south of that. This screenshot is from a day that was moderately active, but nowhere near as active as March. And this little screenshot's also old because we used to collect tweets and have a whole method for doing that. And you can see those little tweets on there, but we don't any longer, which has both pros and cons. But in a library setting, a pro would be that there's no content that could be kind of not safe for everyone coming from any tweets, even though they were highly, highly filtered. Okay, so there's a few other places to look for aurora material. Podcasts, there's a great podcast about the aurora named Steve for Kids. Of course, NASA's Space Place, and a big shout out to the University of Alaska Museum of the North, which came up with the chalk art activity that we are about to talk about. And then, of course, NASA has more resources. They have kind of a heliopedia, which met with many different terms in heliophysics, which is the study of the sun and the way that it influences Earth and the space between there. So that's the area of science at NASA that we're in. And I will quit there, and I am very happy to take other questions and happy to meet you all. And I don't know if Laura mentioned it yet or not, but actually I'll mention two more things. So one is that I recently gave a talk at Boise State University. And so it's like the hour-long version of this talk. It's online, and I'd be happy to share. We're happy to share that. And then we also have, I was also in a library after that and was asked for like a flyer about our project because this was in Idaho and people saw aurora. And so we're drafting a flyer about this project, and we have a draft to share with you today. And we also are happy to get feedback on that and see, you know, if it might be something you might want to post in your library or suggestions that you would have for that. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, Liz, thank you so much. That was so interesting. I have to ask, is this taken near your home in Washington?
No, this is a photo by, again, one of the really great photographers up in Alberta, Christy Turner. And I am not as great of a photographer, but I did get out in my local kind of dark sky area at a state park with a beautiful waterfall in Washington, and got my iPhone out, and it was great. It was actually shocking how bright things were with the iPhone. And many people, even if you couldn't quite see it by eye, the tip is to try your iPhone, which is kind of like a mini night vision, color night vision enhancer basically right now.
Well, yeah, I saw one question that popped in from Joyanne. And sorry, also, I've been typing in the chat and I realized it was just sending it to the host and panelists. So, Joyanne, let's get that one answered first. She asked, I'm always curious about the Aurora Australis. This is the southern latitude end of this big storm. Was there the same impact there? Did you all get a lot of sightings, or was it less intense?
It was intense for a whole day. So it wasn't maybe exactly symmetric. And then the aurora on the southern, well, the Australis, it was actually seen all over Australia, and New Zealand. Normally it can be seen from the southern areas of like Tasmania and New Zealand, looking to the south over the ocean. And so they see it a little differently than we do because they have such a long viewpoint, as they see a lot of the height of the aurora there. But it was just like here, broadly visible. It was visible even to the north from New Zealand. So, or like past overhead in the sky. So really cool.
And have you ever seen the Aurora Australis?
No, I have not.
Oh, that's a great point, Lori, talking about the 2026 theme, and library staff are always looking ahead. For the summer learning program is dinosaurs, so taking the Aurora approach.
Yeah, we can be part of that. That'd be great.
Absolutely. And Adrian's asking if she could use your slides for like presentation or doing programs. I don't know if those are
Yeah, these are kind of a standard sort of deck that we have. We also have local ambassadors who are associated with local groups. Like we have some ambassadors up in Alaska and others in Washington, and they're all around the globe. So they're not in every state, but if there's a specific, we might have someone if you have a location, but you're welcome to use the slides.
looks like Laura actually has a question for you all. And I can probably help answer this. So in terms of these flyers, what kind of access to color ink and print margins and things like that do library staff have? And Laura, I'll let you know that when we are designing flyers, we typically try to make it so it can print really well in grayscale or black and white. But yeah, if put your Aurora questions in the Q&A, and then your response to Laura about just your printer capabilities for producing flyers in the chat.
I'm trying to, oh, I think I'm trying to stop sharing.
To color laser printers, okay. Liz, can I ask, I know there's probably a lot of misconceptions about auroras. Is there ever, I know being up at Fairbanks and just talking to local folks, and they're like, oh, if you see a certain color, or they were sharing stories that their parents or grandparents told them, if you see a certain color, that means it's dangerous, there's radiation. Is there any, is that a misconception, or is there any truth to that? Is there any danger from being outside during a big solar storm?
I would not say there's danger from being outside. The atmosphere protects us from pretty much, well, from all the radiation. There is an increased risk for radiation if you're flying in a plane over the poles. And so the FAA are actually some of the space weather customers and take account of that kind of thing. But again, it's generally more of a concern for like staff, pilots and crew than for passengers. It's more like, yeah, it's not significant for passengers.
Gotcha.
I saw one question about stories, and our website does not have a collection of stories. A really good place to go for some stories and cultural knowledge about Aurora is, again, up at the UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks. They have a cultural connections program and website, and have worked with Inuit elders, Inupiaq elders, and have some good videos there. That would be a really good place to share. Laura, I'm trying to think if we have any other, we generally don't just share stories because they're kind of not ours to share, but we could also, like our blog has some mentions of Indigenous peoples. There's a really great book recently out, and that is mentioned in our blog. I'm trying to, I just shared it with a friend last night, and now the name is escaping me. The authors are Annette Lee and Travis Novitsky, and it goes into the science as well as the photography, as well as Indigenous perspectives really, really well.
And yeah, that's such a great point, Liz, that, in working with tribal and Indigenous communities, sometimes those stories and that those cultural elements aren't ours to share, right? And some of that is held within. those groups. So if you are working with those communities, it's a great that's a great tip. Just make sure that you have that permission to share out some of those cultural elements. I also wanted to add to that list. I did a lot of work with the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, and this is focused on eclipses. But if you're looking for, there's a lot of different cultures around the world that view eclipses in different ways, and they have different interpretations and different ways to celebrate and or be inside. And I'm going to drop that link, hopefully.
Yeah, I think I know which video you're talking about. It's
like
really a great video
Yeah.
with interview with Navajo elders and astronomers, and really interesting sharing of their relationships around the eclipses. And then the name of the book is that I was thinking of earlier is called Spirits Dancing. Laura, would you like to add anything more?
Yeah, I also just wanted to shout out some of our colleagues at the Indigenous Education Institute we work with. They hold periodic workshops that are free and streamed online and really, really excellent. We have made a point of attending those. They're always amazing, and they post them afterwards to share. But if you're interested in different knowledges that are shareable or are not necessarily shareable by us, but shareable by the people to whom they apply, that's a really great resource to point people to.
You have a Q&A I wanted to bring up. And whoever asked this question, it might be helpful to hear where you're coming from, like the latitude of your location. But it just says anonymous attendee. And they said, with that big storm, aurora were stretched across the sky, but much fainter and whiter than when I typically see them. I've seen them with much more color previously with the naked eye. Why was this different?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. The question I would ask back to that anonymous person is actually, how many solar cycles of observations are you comparing to? Because this one was very bright. It was probably it wasn't actually super bright, but it was very large storm. But yeah, I've heard that from someone else who said, oh yeah, my observations go back 5 solar cycles. So mine go back, 2.5 solar cycles in this field. And I do remember one of the last large, very visible storms was it's called the Halloween storm of 2004. And I was in grad school in New Hampshire at the time, and that storm featured a special type of red aurora called Great Red Aurora that is like blood red and very bright to the naked eye. So you just walked outside on Halloween and the sky was this blood red. That doesn't happen for too long. It happens at the beginning of storms. I don't think this particular storm did that. It's actually really hard to tell now because we have all these observations from phones and the phones are so sensitive. But I have yet to actually hear from anybody that really saw the blood red for this last storm. Maybe for some of the ones also in 2023. But we have a saying in my field, like, if you've seen one storm, you've seen one storm. Reeves 2003, I think is there's an actual citation for that. But yeah, they all do vary. They have different drivers, and we are still figuring out, especially for these most rare events, why they look the way they do. And that's also why people's observations are helpful. So I hope that long answer helped.
Yeah, and this person said they had been observing for 5 cycles.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, and so back in like the 50s and 60s, the sun was even more active than it was in the last 20 years, let's say. So this most recent the solar maximum before this one, so like 2014, 2015, that one actually was pretty wimpy. It didn't have any of these really big superstorms. So that's why I was going back to solar maxes, to the one in 2004. And then the one prior to that, 1989, that one did have a large space weather effect on the power grid, and was a very large storm as well. But and then if you keep going back to like the 50s, there were some very active solar cycles. So that's why it was brighter generally. But
Liz, I have so many questions that I've been thinking of to I was like, well, if nobody else has questions, I have plenty. Looking towards like the next few months or the next year, how long do you think we're in? You know, I know the solar cycle, we're kind of coming up on the peak in the next year or so. You know, for us and that are in central to central northern latitudes, how long should we keep our fingers crossed?
Oh, definitely, definitely for the next few years. So even after the maximum, the sun's activity and the solar cycle is driven by the sun's magnetic field actually changing directions every 11 years. And as a result, its activity varies. So right around solar maximum, you get more of these big complex sunspots that let out large coronal mass ejections. But after the maximum and towards the minimum, you get more of what are called coronal holes. And those actually also drive activity because they have a super fast solar wind. And so after the maximum is historically when some of the largest storms have happened, because you can have the possibility of having both the fast and the strong together. So, you know, I would definitely say sign up for an alert for your location at Aurorasaurus, and that will also help increase your chances.
Yeah, somebody was asking, they're like, you know, where can I sign up for these alerts? And I think, yeah, Aurorasaurus is the resource where you want to go look for that. I do just want to mention, Christine, I was going to mention it in my resources, but if you look in the chat and go back a few messages, my colleague Christine Chupla has shared a message that the University of Alaska Geophysical Institute has copies of I'm going to mispronounce it, Paiugat, the Northern Lights Elementary School, Northern Seward, Pennsylvania, like some student guides based on auroras, and you can reach out to me. I would appreciate it if you're putting it in the chat, if you don't mind sending me an email just so it's in my inbox and I can catalog it a little bit better, and we can get some of those guides shipped for you. I believe that was, you know, free of cost, just a resource to get out there. So yeah, please do email me. I see Lori and Joyanne have already indicated. So I'll have my email at some point in the next few slides. And yeah, you can reach out about that. All right. I think, Liz, for time's sake, we should probably move on to the chalk art activity. I had one more poll question. I think I'll save that towards the end. And we'll just go right into the chalk art activity. Let's see. And do you all are you going to share your screen? I have my camera with the activity supplies here, but.
Yeah, I was thinking we would watch you and I can kind of talk you through the steps. There is a lesson plan on this from University of Alaska Fairbanks. I'm going to drop that in the chat because I have it. But let me see. Okay, so you have your stencil.
I have and this is
perfect.
just one I put out myself.
Yeah.
I have some pastels here. And I will be quiet and let you talk in just a second. But for all of those that maybe did a workshop with us, you know, we promoted that Eclipse chalk art activity really heavily. This, you can use, you know, just the same materials. If you have, you know, maybe Eclipse stuff isn't too relevant right now. This is a great way to use some of those materials. You don't need the paper plate. I've got pastels. I think they work a little bit better than chalk, but you can also use colored chalk. I have some hand sanitizer wipes for myself. And you'll see I currently have this on some newspaper just because I'm at my house. I have a white table I'm using, and my wife will kill me if I get pastels all over it. They can get a little messy. So I'd recommend like a tablecloth, some cleanup wipes. It's not that messy of an activity, but if you get an over exuberant kid or adult, as this happened to me, then yeah.
Great. So what color are you going to start with?
Let's see.
You want to color the top edge of your stencil with colored chalk, maybe a green or a red or a purple.
So let's see. I'll take this red. You said color the top edge of the stencil?
Mm-hmm.
So like right up here.
Yeah, on the stencil. Perfect. Yep.
Great. Is that a good thickness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm looking at your hands upside down, and for a second it looked like you were
Oh, yeah.
left-handed, and then I'm like, no, you're not left-handed. I'm left-handed, so I shouldn't demonstrate this. It would be even harder to see.
All right. Is that thick enough, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is very adaptable, and you do not need any artistic talent, really. But you want to smudge the pastel or the chalk onto the black paper using your
Ooh.
finger or a tissue. So yeah, you're getting it. I can kind of see it. I think it is, keep going. We'll do a reveal, and then I think people can see it. But yeah, and you want to go up the paper so it's, the red's really tall, so you might try and make it real tall there. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and then if you release your stencil there, you kind of will see, and actually you can then flip it over, because then it will look like a little bit of the sky. So yeah, you've got a little bit of, I think the technical term for that is possibly a SAR arc, yet another kind of aurora.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, and then you can, kind of layer some green or whatever you want. If you have an image in mind, perhaps, of what you saw.
Green be right below that? Like, technically, okay. Let's just do a little.
And with kids, it's really open to interpretation. There's a few examples on the lesson plan and different ways of doing it. And yeah, it looks really cool.
I remember doing Eclipse chalk art with a librarian, and they were so happy because they did it, and then they had a sunspot on it, and I was like, well, I don't quite got the idea here, but you're showing an eclipse sun, but they were having fun. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I did not mention that we are having such a big year with the eclipses and the solar maximum and the chances for aurora. It's kind of a heliophysics big year, if you have heard of that. There's actually a link for that too. So yeah, that's a great start. And yeah, I think people get the idea. I don't know if people have questions.
I know, but I'm having so much fun. I don't
want to. You are having fun. We could, I was gonna say we could let you go and then come back after the next part, but I think you're actually doing the next part of the presentation.
I am already. Yep.
Okay, so
this will be a quick version.
Brooks is having a good time. Yeah, you can do it quickly. It's I would actually love to learn from any of the librarians exactly kind of how you might see this in your classroom. I've done this as an informal, not classroom, sorry, because you're not in a classroom. I've done this in informal camps and things. I've done it a family science night, and we've done it in some classrooms too. But it would be, we would love to learn more about how this would fit into the kind of programming in your library, just because, libraries vary so much and there's always different ways of doing things. So that'd be great to know.
Michael says you could see the Teen Tech Squad doing this. I have a question for you about a Teen Tech Squad. Do you have how many people here have 3D printers in their libraries? Because we also have a 3D print project that's a little bit involved, but very cool as a educational tool, but also could be a nice print project for an intermediate print group. And I'll put the link for that in the chat as well.
It is a print of the whole magnetosphere. So most of the people who've printed this, some people have used it in their college classrooms. But certainly people can be can get into it. It's kind of the 3D version of the Earth's magnetic field fit onto a 3D printer. Oh yeah, adults. Yeah, I've definitely seen adults get very into this. Yeah.
I find any kind of craft that deals with art and decorating scales for age really, really well. And that's always really fun.
One thing we've seen, sorry, I'm definitely in my closet right now, apologies. Is that like passive programming, right? So instead of having somebody sit there and facilitate and walk you through it, you know, just setting up a stand, and I can see this a good one for that.
Yeah. There's also, if you guys do jewelry workshops, which I know I've seen at some libraries, University of Alaska Fairbanks has a pony bead Aurora colors bracelet that they do, and that we adapted into a pair of earrings. And I'll put that in the chat as well. It's got both links in it. So that could be a fun kind of, you know, afternoon with various ages.
I had that bracelet on just the other day and it's not on right now, but I think I brought it up to Boise where I was at a star party and there were students and I was showing it off, and then I must have eventually taken it off. But the bracelet is a very simple activity for elementary school ages 2.
Yeah, University of Alaska Fairbanks and the Museum of the North have wonderful early learner activities. Really, really love those.
Yeah, and if I believe Amy shared a link bank, I'll have a slide for that in just a moment, I believe. And in that link bank, there's a few Aurora specific activities, and then I'll in a moment just show you how you can access some Aurora adjacent activities. I'll say some solar science activities and some earth science activities in just a moment through our clearinghouse.
Awesome. While you're doing that, I'll go grab the 3D print so people can see it.
Cool. Awesome. All right, if y'all have more Aurora related questions, please by all means do pop them in the chat and Q&A. I'm just going to give you some kind of
Or stories you might want to share. Yeah. About seeing it.
Liz, I was been doing the solar science workshops. I did like 40 of them over the past 2 years, and I got clouded out for the eclipse, and I was so sad. I was like, oh, I've been talking about this nonstop for 2 years. I didn't get to see anything. And then just, yeah, about a month later, got to have that Aurora experience. And I was like, yes, the sun has got my back.
Your helio big year is redeemed.
It is, yes.
Yeah. I have not heard that exact example. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is screenshot this slide. As opposed to trying to put all the links in that link bank, I just set the one URL there, and I believe Amy, if you want to drop it in the chat again, that might be helpful for folks. Sorry, that's a long URL, but some of the URL shorteners will expire after a certain amount of time, and I was hoping, you know, people might be interested in getting these links for a while. This webinar, and if this is your first StarNet webinar, this is like a really good taste of what we like to do. We talk a lot about STEM activities, STEM content. You know, we recognize that you in your library, you might not necessarily be a STEM expert or a STEM subject matter expert, but you have all of the tools to facilitate an amazing program. You know, you might have heard me talk about being a guide on the side, right? You don't have to be the subject matter holder of knowledge. And I think kids, or all patrons, kind of learn better that way when they're learning with you. So we have a lot of resources about how to, you know, be a good facilitator, also about how to partner with community organizations, how to partner with subject matter experts to bring them into your library. I believe Liz maybe mentioned some solar system ambassadors. That's a NASA volunteer network that we like to work with. So please check out some of our previous webinars. Check out StarNet as well. That's my email for those of you that have any questions or wanted access to that guide that I mentioned. So I'll give you all another few seconds to screenshot this. And
I love that, Brooks. I have no science background. I was a history major. So a lot of this stuff, explaining all of this, and part of what we're trying to do is make sure that everyone has access to this information regardless of science background.
Yeah. And I think it's so powerful too if like you get asked a question about auroras and as a library staff, you're like, I don't know, what a great question. I have all these resources. Let's go find out together. I think that creates a cool dynamic with you and your patrons.
It's true.
So many of you have probably heard me go on and on about our STEM activity clearinghouse. This is like the one resource that I try to work into every single presentation. This is about 600 plus STEM activities that we know work well in a library setting. They were either, written for a library setting or maybe written for another informal organization. They're not school activities unless we find a really kind of good, fun, informal school activity. But most of these, they're not like a week by week curriculum guide or anything like that. It's like, hey, I got an hour or I got 45 minutes. What's a fun, cheap, engaging activity that I can do? So yeah, definitely check out the clearinghouse. We have plenty of videos walking you through how to use it step by step, but I did want to highlight a few different things on there. I've been talking a lot about solar eclipses, right? And you can see that's our project called SEAL that is kind of wrapping up because there's not an eclipse on the mainland for quite some time. Those solar eclipse activities are things that are very eclipse focused, but there's a lot of just good solar science activities too that talk about the influence of the sun on us, that talk about shadows, right? It's not just eclipse. We like to call them solar science activities because you can go look at the sun at any point safely. Don't go out right now and stare at the sun. But yeah, so please check out that in terms of solar science activities. And I also wanted to highlight through our NASA at My Library project, one of the things we've been working on lately is translating a lot of our activities, specifically our solar science activities, into Spanish. We'll do some other languages as well, but primarily people have asked us to make them bilingual with Spanish versions. And these are, we recognize that the libraries in our network serve a lot of Spanish-speaking patrons, but typically the library staff themselves are bilingual or English-speaking. So these resources will have like the printables. If you wanted to do a passive program, the things that you would print out and put for your patrons, or the patron-facing resources, I would say, are in Spanish to allow you to, or if you wanted to do like a take-and-make kit, set up a little Eclipse chalk art, or probably you'd want to do Aurora chalk art that may be a little more relevant right now. There's those, Spanish language resources there. So I just included two little activities here. One's our Eclipse chalk art activity. We should definitely translate the Aurora chalk art activity to make it a little more evergreen. And then the one on the left, I believe that's our sorting games activity. How big, how far, how hot. And then I did one when I went to Guam to do some workshops. So I did how deep, which was about the ocean, and how fast. So that sorting games is a really great kind of way to engage kids, to get their patrons of all ages, and to get them thinking about like scale and size and things like that. The Aurora is mentioned in our how far activity. How far is it away from the surface of the earth? So yeah, that's a great resource. Couple of other things are, if you want to join just in general StarNet, it's free, of course. There's no membership dues or anything like that. We have plenty of resources there, all about bringing STEM and libraries. And this is just really my overall StarNet is great slide. We are federally funded, so we won't ever charge you for anything. All our resources are designed to help you. Our Games website is a really fun kind of patron-facing website. If you have patrons that want to play simple science video games that have a basis in real science, send them to Games. That's where we put things that you could just give right to patrons that don't require any facilitation. I did want to say also, with our Star Library Network, we have an online community where library staff can talk to each other. They can share ideas. They can share programs that have worked well. It's like social media ish for library staff. I call it Spacebook. Everybody groans when I make that joke. But yeah, consider checking that out if you're just looking for a good network to talk to other library staff. Oops. Oh, okay. I accidentally stopped screen sharing, but I think that was about my spiel anyway. And Christine's mentioning to check with your state library. As part of that SEAL project, we sent to 47 states through the state libraries. We sent them solar telescopes and sun spotters. You can check with me if you'd like to see if your state has those. The idea was that the state libraries would then circulate those to a lot of different public libraries within the state. Of course, not all state libraries have that capability or circulation mechanisms in place, but you can check with me. I have a lot of pretty maps I made about all the states that have the kits, and that right now would be the time. Now the eclipse fanfare is dying down. Now would be the time to go check out a sunspotter. You're kind of building off that excitement about the eclipse, and you're like, hey, this thing's still really cool for us to go look at and observe and see sunspots and prominences. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about that. Oh yeah, Adrian currently has the kits in I'm going to say it wrong, Ninana. We were emailing how to use the solar telescope and things like that. So yeah, Laura, I used to every other week I was looking at the sun and looking at the sunspots. I don't even know what they're like right now. I bet they're still popping off.
The big one keeps coming back around and we keep looking at it and going, please, please, but not yet. So I did want to show you all really quickly if it's all right. For the techie folks, our 3D print, this is the Earth's magnetic field. It has divots in the top and bottom that are called cusps. It opens up like a little Polly Pocket. And then in here, this is helpful for teaching aurora physics because if the sun is over here and coming towards this side, a lot of people tend to think that particles go straight in at the poles, but that's not even what happens. It interacts with the magnetic field here, stretches back to this magnetotail, and then snaps back into this system here. So it's very cool. You can take it apart and look at more pieces of it. The Earth comes apart so that you can see the driver in the middle of the Earth of the Earth's magnetic field. And it's a really great tool. It's definitely an intermediate print project, but if your library has a 3D printer and folks who do have that level of knowledge, it's a really nice tactile. And I will say I had two cats for a long time and neither of them has managed to destroy it. So it is sturdy enough for public use.
It's very sturdy. It was partly designed by us and partly by a NASA rocket engineer who is used to flying things in space. So, and then Laura, I would say the one, Brooks, you asked about misconceptions earlier, and Laura just touched on one of the misconceptions, which is that the aurora is directly caused by particles coming in those cusps. That actually does happen, but it's not going to cause visible aurora for anybody here unless you're way far up at the poles, like in Svalbard, and where it's dark all the time. So most of all the aurora that we see, and the reason it's on the night side, the dark side of the Earth, is because of what Laura described. And then I wanted to mention one more thing that I just forgot. What was the one more thing? Well, we will put our email address in the chat in case folks have other questions for us. Oh, I'm sorry, I totally lost it.
It's all right. Well, you're thinking.
Oh yeah, the hats, all the demos.
But I love it because it blows my mind that the highest mountains on Earth and airplanes fly on row 1 right here. The ISS is about here. Low Earth orbit with satellites is about here. So they're flying through the aurora, which had never occurred to me until I did this project. So I'm learning all the time too, along with you guys and along with everyone. So, and it's nice for cold weather.
Yes. I remember what I was going to say. So there was a great comment in the chat earlier about this being potentially like a Carrington event, which is really historically or in the near historical record, the strongest storm that we've seen. It was in 1859, and aurora was seen all over the world, into the Caribbean, and telegraph systems worked without power or burned up the wires and that sort of thing. But I would say a couple of points on that. So one, some people are kind of saying that because the aurora was seen so far south, but in this case, it was seen so far south largely by cameras. And the other indices of the strength of the storm really indicate it was nowhere near as big as a Carrington event. it was on the size of like a once in 20-year event, which still makes it significant on a, in the top 20 storms of the last 500 years. Or there's various ways you can say that. And then generally, I was also going to say, like, kind of something to be wary of, maybe a little wary of, is headlines on newspapers and headlines on YouTube. So I think that might be a great point to end on, just that they're, even if the content, you got to really read the content and look for validated sources of information. And sometimes the headlines can be taken out of context. So
Probably good advice for everything.
a lot of things science-wise. Yeah. Yeah.
We do have one more question, and I think we should definitely sign off. More auroras activity in the fall is versus the spring. Is there any?
Yeah, so it's actually at the equinox. So both in like March and September are typically the best months. So where the tilt of the Earth couples with the direction of the magnetic field coming from the sun a little bit better to create bigger storms. That's where it gets pretty complicated, but that's it in a nutshell. So yeah, definitely as September rolls around again, there hopefully will be some more activity.
And just as a final note, I just want to invite everyone here. You are very welcome if you would like to attend our upcoming Reportathon, which is a semi-annual event that we do where we gather scientists and aurora chasers and people who love auroras together. And we chat and talk auroras and do some concentrated reporting. And it's really, really fun. The feedback that I get every time is more hours, but it's 3 hours already. But it's good to know that everybody's enjoying themselves. And if you would like to attend that, just sign up for an account. We'll send out information in our newsletter. But would love to have folks here. You don't have to have seen the aurora to join us. If you're interested, you can just come on and have fun.
We will also get you guys a more finalized version of our newsletter. Sorry, of our flyer based on your feedback, and we would love that to be displayed, especially if you're in a place that saw aurora, which was all of the US. There's a possibility. So thank you so much.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Artwork to go hang up. I'm excited about that. Maybe it'll go up in my closet. So thanks everybody, and please reach out with any questions, and thanks for all the positive feedback.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.